It's not photography unless you print your photos. Is that right? Let's find out. Hi, I'm Adam and welcome back to First Man Photography. And in today's video, we're discussing printing your photos. Is it worthwhile? What's the cost and benefit? And I'll share some tips and a few things I've got wrong along the way. Before we get going today though, this video is sponsored by Canon, and specifically the Canon Image-Prograph Pro 300, a superb 10-ink printer delivering A3 plus gallery quality prints, and we'll take a detailed look at that a little bit later. Over the last few months of videos, I've been talking a lot about the artistic side of photography and exploring, I guess, a more philosophical approach. And I know this makes some people uncomfortable because photography often attracts the type of person who's naturally quite technical. Without doubt, the thing that has had the biggest impact on my photography in the last 10 years is when I began to print my work. And what's so exciting, I think, is it's this enjoyable yet challenging technical process that literally turns your photograph into a physical piece of artwork. And once you experience the joy of holding, even if it's a big one like this, holding that thing in your hands, it's virtually impossible to not start thinking about your photography with a more artistic mindset. This is too big, so I'm going to put that down. There are some who would even suggest that you are not even really doing photography unless you make a print. I probably wouldn't go that far, but I think Ansel Adams was right when he said the negative is comparable to the composer's score and the print is the performance. Each performance differs in subtle ways. These days, we might be dealing with raw files and Lightroom, but there is no question that when we print our work out, it brings the image to life. It becomes this tangible thing with actual real value, and completing the photographic process will give you, well, it does for me anyway, an extremely satisfying and fulfilling moment. One of the pitfalls I fell into when I first started printing was thinking too much about size. I'm sure I'm even on record at some point saying that bigger is better, size matters, and I personally think bigger is better. And there is no doubt that huge and detailed prints like that one behind me are very impressive. But they also get horribly expensive and in most cases become really quite impractical. Also, imagine a world where the key to making good art would be to make it big. That'd be sad and could get silly very quickly. So let's print out and frame up a variety of sizes and figure out what might work for you and see if we can figure out where the sweet spot is. So I think 4x6 is a really nice little size, and if you're using a well-crafted image, then it can still be a piece of artwork worth cherishing. And it's also super versatile to sit on those awkwardly small pieces of wall. It's also nice because you can use them together to make triptychs and collages and things like that. This one here is A4 and it's a lovely size I always use for my box sets. And it's also the size I use for test prints because it still doesn't use too much ink, but it's big enough to sort of check all the detail and that the color's working correctly and things like that. When it's framed, it still has the versatility to sit on the wall or on a windowsill. Now A3 I find a little frustrating. It's not small, but it's not big either. And for me, it just sits in this kind of no man's land that always just leaves me wanting that little bit more. Thankfully, that little bit more comes in the form of A3+. Now this is an absolutely lovely size. It's just that couple of inches bigger than A3, but that makes all the difference. And by the time you've framed it, it becomes a piece of artwork that's perfect for almost every room. A2 is a fantastic size also, and framed up produces a really impressive piece of work, but does mean you have to go up a model on the printer. So for example, from the Pro 300 to the Pro 1000 behind me there. I guess really though, there is no wrong size, but I think the sweet spot is that A3 plus A2 area because it's big and impressive, but it's not too big to become impractical. And if you're selling prints, these are both great sizes that people will really love. One of the mistakes I made when I first started printing at home was assuming that all good quality photo paper was glossy. Of course it isn't, and one of the most exciting things is playing around with different papers, discovering what you like and matching the image to the paper. When printing at home, we essentially have three kinds of paper: matte, semi-gloss, and glossy. Various manufacturers have different names for these, like matte paper is often called smooth cotton rag, and semi-gloss might be called luster or burita, which actually refers to the barium sulfate the paper is treated with. Once you've been printing for a while though, it's very likely you'll develop a favourite kind of paper. But matte paper works really well for contrasty black and white images. It's perfect for landscape images too, especially with things like a misty woodland or images where you want to promote a calm and smooth feeling rather than something that punches you in the face. And that's exactly what full gloss does. And I use this exclusively on my water drop images because it just works so well for pictures that are full of saturated colours. It is very reflective though, which is not to everyone's taste, and it will also require careful positioning when mounting on a wall, although that can be true for all papers once you frame them behind some glass. Probably the paper I use the most though is semi-gloss. I like this because it gives me a nice balance of the other two. It looks really classy and gives a nice sheen, which is particularly effective for images that include water. You can also get textured papers like this fine art rough paper, which can be a really interesting choice for the correct image. I think it works really well for this one of the Medusa tree growing out of the rock. Hopefully you can see the surface details, but because it's a very textured image anyway, it literally gives it a 3D feel, which I think brings the textures of the wood and stone to life. As sad as it is, I could talk about this all day, but my advice would be to start with a semi-gloss and then experiment from there and find out exactly what suits your photography. We're going to look at settings in a minute and how to prepare your file for print, but as you know, this video is sponsored by the Canon Imageprograph Pro 300. This is a fantastic 10-ink printer delivering those lovely A3 plus gallery quality prints. I've been using Canon printers for years and started with the Pro 10S, and the Pro 300 replaces that with some very worthwhile upgrades, including that it now uses the same Lucia Pro ink as the Pro 1000 and even takes that a step further with a newly developed matte black ink that gives deeper and more vivid blacks on fine art paper. It also allows printing of panoramas to almost a meter long, and using the Canon professional print and layout software makes operating the printer really easy. So what I thought I would do is print out two of the same image, one on the Pro 300 and one on the Pro 1000 with the same paper to compare the quality. Now, bearing in mind the Pro 1000 has 12 inks, I can't really see a difference in colour between these two images. But what is very noticeable, and I've come back to these a few times now, is that the Pro 300 version looks that bit better because the blacks from the new matte black ink just look that bit punchier and more impressive. So if you want to start making professional prints at home, hit the link down below and check out the Canon Pro 300. Right, let's talk about settings, and I want to keep this brief because it's always going to be slightly different for everyone based on your gear combination, essentially. I still get this wrong all the time, and it usually requires a number of fine adjustments and failed prints before I'm happy. Let's start with monitor calibration, because using a calibrated monitor is the best way to accurately reproduce the color you see on screen onto the paper, but I personally don't think it's essential and certainly shouldn't put you off getting started, particularly these days because many people only have laptops and you can even print from your iPad. A cheaper tactic is to first print your image as a smaller print to check it. With experience, you start to learn whether your monitor shifts a bit warm or adds magenta, and you can then adjust the print accordingly. The next thing is to use ICC profiles, which are little plugins you get from the paper manufacturer that simulate on screen how the final print will look on paper using your specific printer model. Even with a calibrated monitor though, I will then always add about 1/3 of a stop of exposure because your paper doesn't have a backlight like your monitor does. Also, shadow areas can often be much darker on paper, especially with matte paper. So on some occasions, it's necessary to also boost the shadows. And in some particular cases, it can be quite a lot to get the print looking right. Another mistake I used to make was not keeping my print files organized. I use Lightroom, which has a soft proofing feature, which essentially creates a virtual copy where you can make your print adjustments. And then I keep them organized in a collection for whenever I need to make another print in future. We say printing is the final stage of the photographic process, but I guess really this is not true because we then want to display them and show them. And how you display your print is entirely up to you. I've stuck all these ones up on the wall with blue tack, which is not a good idea when you get hit by a 40-degree heat wave because the blue tack just melts and they all fall off the wall. Framing is probably the most traditional way, where we also sit the image against a mount to create a nice border. I think the double border from the paper itself also looks really nice, where you can see the signature of the artist. If you subscribe to the Raw Room, there is a detailed tutorial on there showing exactly how I frame my images. But one top tip is to make sure you tape up the back of the image to stop dust, moisture, and flies getting in. Personally, I sign all my prints that I sell. I put the title and edition number in the bottom left and then sign and date the bottom right. I use a HB pencil to sign images on cotton rag paper, and for semi-gloss and glossy where the pencil doesn't work, I use this dark grey pen which is a uni pin 0.1 I think and has the same appearance as pencil. You can achieve a more modern look by mounting on metal like this one of the water drop here. I think that's really nice. The print's directly onto the metal, or you can do it in Perspex. And I also think large prints just look really good mounted on a nice foam board like that one behind me there. It also makes them light to mount on the wall, and the ones I've got up here just use Velcro. Whenever I talk about printing your own photos, the big question, particularly relevant at the moment, is what is the cost? Many of us would not think twice really about spending £600 on a lens if we believed it was going to do something new for us. But many are reluctant with a printer. Personally, I think selling a lens for £600 and reinvesting it into a printer will do a lot more for your photography. Over time, it also becomes a lot cheaper than going to a lab. The lab I use, which produces high quality fine art prints, similar to the quality we can produce here, charge around £25 for an A3 plus print. It's great for a one-off, but your £600 there will only get you about 24 prints, and you'll easily get that out of the ink that comes with your printer, although you do have to factor in a couple of pounds for each piece of paper. It's hard to say really what the ongoing cost will be because it depends on how much you print and what size. I print pretty much every image I take, which is usually a few a week, and spend no more than £20 per month on ink. But that does save me on money for birthday presents, Christmas presents, and every other gift-giving day you can think of. For me though, the value of controlling the photographic process from start to finish is second to none. There is a cost to it, but we're making a physical and valuable thing, so that's to be expected. Producing, selling, and showing people my photographs in print form is 10 times more satisfying than doing it online, and people then immediately understand the intrinsic value of photography that's so often lost on a screen. So I hope you enjoyed that. Click here if you want more details on the cost and value of printing, or click here if you want some ideas about selling your prints, or click down below to check out that Canon Pro 300. And I will see you on another video very, very soon.